Okay, so a lot to unpack here, and I guess what I'd like to ask you right now is what has been announced so far in terms of measures? What do we know so far?
So it's exactly as you described in the introduction. We know that if you're unvaxxed, you'll be unable to board a commercial plane or any plane or a via train anywhere in Canada starting October 30th. It looks like there's a 1 month grace period for people who are in the process of getting vaccinated, where you will be able to submit a negative COVID test in order to travel. But after that, the rules are very clear, although they haven't been announced or delineated. And the Prime Minister did say this past weekend that exemptions will be exceedingly narrow and, quite frankly, onerous. And that is more or less a direct quote.
Yeah, I heard that direct quote over the weekend myself, and he was quite particular to say they will be exceedingly rare and onerous. So how do these latest measures impact our Canadian charter rights? Obviously, you're a lawyer, you work for the Canadian Constitutional Foundation, a fine organization. How do you see these new measures impacting those rights?
Yeah, so Section 6 of the Charter provides every Canadian with the right to enter, remain in, and leave Canada. And that's pretty clear. And historically, it's been interpreted as pretty black and white. It's one of the collection of what are called fundamental freedoms that cannot be superseded by the Section 33 notwithstanding clause, which just basically means the government is kind of bypassing the charter for some period, to really simplify it. And so it's in this collection of fundamental freedoms that the courts historically have been very skeptical to defer to governments. Now, of course, we're in extraordinary times. Nothing like this has happened since 1982 when the charter was adopted. But I suspect that any legal debate will come down to Section 1, the so-called weenie clause, which allows government to say, this is justified in light of our directive for public health reasons.
And I think that's where the public is as well. They're saying, okay, yet again, we'll buckle down and take these measures. Some might, some not, I don't know. But there's some people who say, okay, we'll have appetite for this latest restriction, but you've got to show me the proof. You've got to show me that this is really what's warranted. So can we anticipate then that there will be some discussion in courts at some point where the government will have to provide evidence as to why these measures are necessary?
Well, you would certainly hope so, and perhaps we'll talk about possible challenges later. The thing that I personally, as a legal observer, have just been gobsmacked by is that in its communications around this policy, the government has not even gestured towards proof. They haven't explained why it's not sufficient to allow a COVID-19 negative test, as is already required, why air travel or travel in general is particularly prone to infection. As far as I know, air travel has actually been shown to be safer than, for example, eating in a restaurant. And so the government hasn't even provided the sort of like gesture towards scientific evidence, which is really disturbing to me as just an overall precedent.
Well, it's funny you mentioned about the jurisdictions, if you will. So obviously airports are federal jurisdiction, and I can understand that this is within Mr. Trudeau, and the Via Rail is a Crown corporation. So these are areas within his jurisdiction. When we look at the provinces, and again, there's this whole debate being waged at the provincial level where we see, like you said, the restrictions at the restaurant, where you see restrictions in schools, in hospitals, in sports teams. That is provincial jurisdiction. So I feel almost like we're kind of stuck in the middle as Canadians. We're getting it federally, we're getting it provincially, and sometimes I feel like I'm being suffocated here as a Canadian. But anyways, we're going to pick up this discussion in just a few moments.